Hey everybody, I'm Josh Constine, the former editor-at-large for TechCrunch and now a principal investor and head of content at SignalFire. I'm going to teach you everything I possibly can about startup PR in the next 20 minutes. So let's just jump right in. So startup PR is all about creating emotional resonance. It's about making somebody believe that something matters before it even exists. And all great pitches, they come down to 3 steps. First is the problem, explaining why there's something wrong with the world that you're going to fix. Second, explaining your solution, why what you offer is going to make their lives or their business a lot better. And third, why you are the team that's going to succeed at building this product. So it's really important to understand that there's a lot of risks to PR as well as benefits. So first off, it's a distraction. It's going to take time from your founders. It's not something that even with a PR firm or an internal comms person, you're going to be able to just fire and forget. You're going to have to plan out your messaging, do interviews, and so it will take time away from building your business. Second, it exposes secrets. It's going to cut down that head start that you have over other startups by revealing a little bit of your secret sauce. So if your product isn't super defensible, it may just be making it easier for other people to copy you. And the third is that if you're too early to grow, sometimes getting PR and getting press is actually going to bring in users before you're ready for them. Maybe that's because you're not ready to onboard them. You haven't built a great onboarding experience. Or because your technology just isn't there yet. You're not ready to scale and all your servers might catch fire and the system might break down under the load. Or you might just have an unclustered user base where instead of people all joining and being able to work with their friends on a product, instead they have to wait for other people that they know to get on because they're completely isolated from other users of the product. So it's not always too early to start PR for a startup. You want to make sure you're ready. But there are huge opportunities if you do PR right for a startup. The number one opportunity is in recruiting. By getting your name out there and getting some legitimacy, people are going to know about your company and they're going to want to do inbound requests to come work for you. And that can be really valuable if you're trying to build a team quickly. Second is fundraising. Let's admit it, VCs often ascribe to a herd mentality. And if they hear that something is really hot and buzzy and they think a bunch of other investors are going to suddenly know about it, they're going to want to jump in, learn more about your company, and potentially get involved before other people do. And third, you have an opportunity to build partnerships, especially for B2B and SaaS companies. You're going to be able to get your foot in the door with those CIOs or the people that purchase your product. But what you're not going to get from startup PR is what some companies got a decade ago, and that's rampant, sudden viral growth. Unless your product is super novel and cool sounding, really visual and works great in animated GIFs, or just is completely mind-blowing and something nobody's ever even thought about before, it's going to be difficult for you to get the kind of explosive growth that's going to really move the needle for you. But these other opportunities, recruiting, fundraising, and partnerships, those could help you grow just as fast as going viral on the web. So why should you believe me about startup PR? Well, as the ex-editor-at-large of TechCrunch for 10 years, I wrote over 4,000 blog posts and became the world's most cited tech journalist from 2016 to 2020. During that time, I worked with tons of startup PR people and found out what really works when they're trying to pitch us to get into blogs and newspapers. And now I'm at SignalFire, which is an early stage VC fund. And we offer our startups a bunch of services like recruiting through our Beacon technology, an advising network, and also one-on-one sessions with people like me to help you. So if you want more, hit us up after this session. So let's talk about why it's difficult to actually get PR and get startup press. Well, reporters' inboxes are overflowing with garbage. So many people are just pitching us stuff that nobody actually wants to read about. And so what's really different here is that for most founders, they control everything inside of their company. But when it comes to PR, you have to deal with the fickle interests of a journalist and their publication and their readers. And so you just don't have that same control. So give up on thinking that you have complete control of this situation and realize you're going to have to be cooperative. And step one to that is understanding what is and what isn't newsworthy. And really that means thinking about who the publication is that you're trying to pitch, who the reporter is, and who their audience is. So let's start up with the audience. You need to be pitching a story that's going to make people say, wow, that's really fascinating, enough that I want to share this with other people. That's how reporters really get traction to their articles, and that's what they're looking for. An editor needs to be able to say, oh, wow, we were the first to this story. This was a really interesting building trend that's going to become more and more important over time. And that's why we want to write about this now before our competitors. And finally, the reporter themselves needs to say, does this fit my beat and does this fit my schedule? Can I actually get to this right now? And am I the expert who's going to be able to write most convincingly about this topic? So what you should really understand is that you don't want to just give a tiny little piece of news by itself, because most often that's just going to feel like it's going to get drowned out in the legion of blog posts every day. You know, TechCrunch publishes about 65 posts every single day. And there's just so much noise going out there that you can't be guaranteed to get coverage just because you have a new product update or you raised a little bit of money or you've got some new hire. You know, if you want to be able to do a story about a single piece of news alone, it better be, you know, a huge new product launch that's completely different than anything else in the market. You're raising maybe $10 million or more, or you've hired somebody that you've poached from your biggest competitor or one of the huge tech giants that's really relevant to what your business is. So then when you're thinking about targeting which publications to reach out to, you want to be thinking about who their audience is. So if you're trying to reach engineers, you might want to be working with startup blogs like TechCrunch or The Information or VentureBeat. If you're trying to reach high-ranking CIOs, you might be more interested in something like the Wall Street Journal. Whereas if you're trying to reach teens, you might be looking at more like magazines like the Mel or other teen-focused publications, or even working with influencers. So when it comes to targeting specific reporters, you should be thinking about what is in their beat. Because if you pitch us something that's not in our beat, we actually have to re-pitch it to somebody else on our team. And it's usually going to get lost in that flow. And we don't want to be your PR people for you. So we're not going to give all our all into making that pitch. So instead, it's really important when you're pitching reporters to figure out who is the best person at a publication to reach out to. And so the best way to do that is start by searching a publication's name and then keywords related to your company. That might be what industry you're in or competitors of yours, and search for those on either Google or a website called TechMeme, TechMeme, and you'll find which reporters are actually writing about that topic. Then you can know to pitch them specifically, because they're going to have the most credibility in that industry. Not just are they going to be able to, get their editor to actually let them write about it, but they're going to be the one that people in your industry believe. And so when you're thinking about building relationships with a reporter or picking which publication to reach out to, you got to think about what your product really does. First, you want to be building a relationship long term, and that often means providing value to that reporter. Rather than just coming in and pitching right away, you want to give them help with other things. That might be telling them about interesting stories you heard, like somebody else that's raising a secret round, or that's made a big hire, or that's got a big upcoming product coming up. If you can effectively give a reporter a scoop, they're going to kind of owe you a favor. And that doesn't mean they'll write about you, but they'll at least take your pitch meeting. You want to pick somebody who isn't just an easy pushover. If you're going for a really softball interview, or somebody who's not going to ask you hard questions, you have to know that anybody who reads that article is probably going to take it with a grain of salt. They're going to be a little bit skeptical because it seems so gushy and positive. Picking a reporter that is straight across the board and actually gives real criticism about what's wrong with your product while complimenting what's good about it is going to give a lot more credibility to that press. And when people read it, they're going to believe it. You also want to think about which reporters actually do the extra legwork to promote their stories. So for instance, some reporters are very active on social media, and they're going to do a lot of work to go out there and promote their stories and get extra traffic and extra reach for them. But some other reporters aren't even on Twitter, or don't really care about social media, and they end their job when they hit the publish button. And maybe you want to prioritize ones that have that extra reach. You also want to think about which publication is visually well matched to what you do. If you're something that's a piece of enterprise software, maybe not that sexy, not that visual, it's fine to be pitching publications like Reuters or Bloomberg that very rarely contain extra visuals. But if you're something really visual, you want to be showing off video and animated GIFs, it's colorful, it's a gadget, a piece of hardware, or something that's really interesting to look at, then you might want to be working with publications like The Verge and TechCrunch, which put lots of visuals and even video into their articles. And finally, you need to think about who has a paywall, and are you going to get stuck behind that paywall? You probably want your article to be accessible to the maximum amount of people in your target audience. And so some publications, they're going to toss your story behind a paywall or even a second paywall, and that means it's going to be a lot harder to get that distribution. So when you're talking to reporters, ask them, hey, is this going to appear in the free version, or are people going to need a subscription to this, or are they going to have to pay even more, like a few $100s a year just to be able to read this? And think about your strategy so that you get in front of the most people possible. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about how to make your stories as emotionally resonant with your target audience and those reporters as possible. So you need to be thinking about what is your superhero origin story, or the superhero origin story of your founder. And what that means is that because so many startups die because they quit, not just because they run out of money or get outcompeted, you need to make sure that there's some driving force behind your founders that's going to make them never quit, that they're going to stick with this business no matter what. Even if they have to lay off everybody and start all over and pivot everything, they're going to find a solution to this problem because it hurts them personally. So this is why I call it a superhero origin story. You probably know the story of Batman. His parents were murdered by a mugger in Gotham City, and so he became a superhero so he could clean up the streets and fight that crime that cost him so much. And so you want to have a story that's kind of similar. Some great examples are like Jan Koum, the founder of WhatsApp. His family moved from the Ukraine to the United States when he was really young, and they didn't have enough money to pay for long-distance phone calls. And that meant that he felt really disconnected from his family, and he didn't understand, if it's just data moving over a wire, why should it cost a few dollars per minute just to talk to the people that I love? And so he went out and built WhatsApp, which is a free communication tool so everybody could stay in touch with their family. And he eventually signed the acquisition papers for the buyout by Facebook on the steps of the welfare office where his family used to collect checks. You knew that he was going to do anything he could to solve that communication problem because he had that superhero origin story. Another great example is Jack Dorsey, who founded Twitter, but also Square. When Jack was young, he used to work in his dad's pizza place. And increasingly, people wanted to pay with credit card. But because there was a big flat fee on credit card swipes, it took a huge amount of their margins on a small, cheap slice of pizza. And so Jack went on to build Square so that all small businesses and merchants could take credit cards at an affordable rate and open them up to a new base of customers. And one of our founders at SignalFire, of one of our portfolio companies called Tempo, they make a weightlifting machine for home. It's a screen that helps you work on your form and counts your reps. You can think of it like Peloton for weightlifting. And the founder, Moelia, he actually grew up and became homeless at one point. But personal trainers at the YMCA taught him to be a personal trainer. He ended up building a business out of that and paying for himself to go to Columbia so that he could study computer science and go on to start a company to help everyone get a personal trainer, even if they couldn't afford $100 in-person sessions every week. So those are the kind of superhero origin stories you want to be telling when you're talking to reporters, because not only is it going to convince them that you're never going to quit, but it's going to help your company have the kind of morale and have the draw to potential recruits or clients to say that, hey, we're going to stick with it and fix this problem no matter what. And so it's really important that it's not just the founder that understands your story, because every team member is the chief storytelling officer. You never know when you're going to need to pitch. It might be a random run-in with somebody at a conference. It could be a candidate interview while you're trying to sell a potential hire on why they should come and join your company. It could be in a customer support call and your customer support team just trying to convince someone to stick with your service. It could be client pitches to potential partners, or just running into somebody at a dinner party that says, oh, wow, I actually do exactly what you're looking for. Tell me about it. Or like, wow, I actually really need that product. It might not be the CEO doing that pitch. So it's important to teach everybody across your company how to be an incredible storyteller. So there's a few more things that I want to talk about before we finish up and get into our Q&A. So if you want more help with this kind of stuff, come and talk to SignalFire. We're a $500 million early stage fund, and you can get extra one-on-one help from me on startup PR, but you'll also get access to our team that built Beacon, which is a predictive recruiting engine, which understands who is the most poachable talent that you're looking for. We rank almost all of the talent in the Western Hemisphere, in the Western world, and we can help you find, at scale, all of the employees to fill the open roles at your company. We also process almost 4% of the credit card transaction data in the US, so we can tell how you should be pricing your product and where the market trends are moving. And we have recruiters from Facebook and the chief talent officer of Netflix who can help you make sure you actually score those hires that you really want. Plus, we have 75 of the top business leaders in the world, like the founders of Instagram, Slack, and other companies who are invested advisors. And because they're actually LPs in our fund, they really are incentivized to help our startups. And now I want you to remember that if you want to connect with me after the session, feel free to hit me up. I'm happy to talk with you. You can message me on Twitter, or you can hit me up on my newsletter, constine.substack.com. And some of the other things that we can teach you include the 3 most important elements of a pitch, how to run exclusives and embargoes, and the 13 questions that every startup reporter is going to ask you. But there's one more thing I want to teach you about before we get into the Q&A. And that's that you need to be the most excited person in the room when you're pitching your startup. Because no one is going to believe you if you aren't passionate about it. If they think that you're bored of your own company already, they're going to think that you're going to quit. And whether that's somebody who's potentially going to fund you, somebody who might want to come work for you, or somebody who's going to write about you, they want to know that you're going to be around in a few years and that they look like they made a really smart choice by working with you early. And so you need to be excited. You need that Flavor Flav energy. You've got to be the most passionate person in the room. But at the same time, don't believe your hype, because internally you need to be real with your team about the risks that they're taking, and the opportunities that may not always materialize. And by being vulnerable with your team, you're going to develop a much deeper sense of camaraderie. Like I said, most startups quit. They don't get outcompeted. They don't run out of money. And great storytelling will help will you through the darkest moments in your story. They're going to be what gets you and your team out of bed in the morning. So while you might think about messaging, communication, and PR as being all external, it also really matters just to you and your team. So practice that story. Figure out how to tell that problem, solution, and evidence as succinctly and as vividly as possible so that people want to get behind you. Now, I hope that these tips have helped, and I'd love to fund your vision for a better future one day.